The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint, sweet perfume of blooming honeysuckle as the moving truck rumbled away, its departure marking both an ending and a beginning. Lisa, a spirited 8-year-old with eyes that sparkled with untamed curiosity, and hair as wild and curly as a summer storm, bounced on the manicured lawn of their new suburban home. Her mother, Nina, a woman whose every movement radiated a quiet strength, placed a gentle hand on Lisa's shoulder. "Well, what do you think, sweetheart?" Nina's voice, a soft melody of excitement and apprehension, drifted on the warm breeze. Lisa tilted her head, her gaze sweeping across the unfamiliar landscape. "It's different," she decided, a thoughtful frown appearing between her brows. Her eyes, bright and earnest, landed on a venerable oak, its ancient limbs stretching towards the sky like gnarled fingers. "But I like the tree. Can we put a swing on it?" A soft laugh escaped Nina, the sound a gentle release of tension. "We'll see, maybe once we're all settled in." Malcolm, Lisa's father, joined them, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "That's the last of the boxes," he announced, his voice a robust counterpoint to Nina's. "What do you say we order some pizza and call it a day?" As they stepped across the threshold of their new home, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the neighborhood's atmosphere became apparent. Curious glances, like whispered secrets, followed them. They were, after all, the sole black family on a street, perhaps even in the entire neighborhood, where homogeneity reigned supreme. Later that evening, as they gathered around an upturned box that served as their makeshift dining table, Malcolm raised a slice of pizza, its cheesy aroma filling the air. "To new beginnings," he declared, his voice imbued with a warm, unwavering hope. Nina and Lisa echoed his sentiment, their pizza slices meeting in a soft, crust-against-crust clink. They spoke of their dreams, of the fresh canvas this new chapter offered. "I can't wait to set up my home office!" Nina exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with newfound purpose. "No more commuting for me. I'll be able to work on my designs right here." Malcolm nodded, a proud smile gracing his lips. "And I'm sure you'll knock their socks off at the new firm," he said, referring to his own demanding job in the bustling city. "It's a bit of a drive, but the opportunity is worth it." Lisa, her mouth full of cheesy pepperoni, piped up. "What about my new school? Do you think I'll make friends?" Nina and Malcolm exchanged a fleeting glance, their smiles faltering almost imperceptibly. "Of course you will, sweetie," Nina assured her, her voice a bomb. "You're smart, kind, and funny. The other kids will love you." Malcolm added, his tone gentle. "Just be yourself, Lisa. That's all you need to do." As the evening deepened, their voices, a symphony of hopes and dreams, filled the empty spaces of their new house. They spoke of future adventures, of memories yet to be forged. Yet, beneath the veneer of excitement, an undercurrent of uncertainty rippled. They were venturing into uncharted territory, a predominantly white neighborhood that might not extend the warm embrace they so desperately desired. Nina and Malcolm had debated this extensively before their move, meticulously weighing the promising opportunities against the potential, unspoken challenges. "We're doing this for Lisa," Malcolm had asserted during one of their late-night conversations, his voice unwavering. "Better schools, safer streets. She deserves every chance we can give her." Nina had agreed, but now, as she surveyed their living room, still littered with boxes and cloaked in unfamiliar shadows, a twinge of anxiety tightened around her heart. Would they truly be accepted here? Would Lisa truly be able to flourish? As if sensing her mother's unspoken unease, Lisa snuggled closer on the couch. "I'm glad we're here together," she murmured, her small hand finding Nina's. Nina squeezed her daughter's hand, a surge of fierce love and primal protectiveness washing over her. "Me too, baby," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Me too." The family spent the remainder of the evening unpacking essentials, preparing for the challenges the next day would bring. Malcolm's first day at his demanding new job, and more significantly, Lisa's inaugural day at her new school. As Nina tucked Lisa into bed that night, the room still cluttered with the silent promise of unpacked boxes, she paused, her fingers gently smoothing her daughter's dark, curly hair. "Are you excited about tomorrow?" she asked, her voice a soft lullaby. Lisa nodded, her eyes wide, reflecting the faint glow of the night light. A little nervous too, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. That's okay, Nina reassured her, her words a soothing balm. It's normal to feel nervous about new things. But remember, you're brave and strong. You've got this. Lisa smiled, her fears, like wisps of smoke, seemed to melt away under her mother's loving gaze. Thanks, Mom. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Sweet dreams. As Nina quietly closed Lisa's door, she leaned against the cool wall for a moment, drawing a deep, fortifying breath. She hoped, with every fiber of her being, that tomorrow would mark the genesis of something truly wonderful for all of them, especially for Lisa. In their own bedroom, Nina found Malcolm already in bed, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through his phone, meticulously checking his new commute route. Checking the route again? She asked, a faint smile touching her lips as she climbed in beside him. He nodded, setting his phone aside. Want to make sure I don't get lost on my first day, he said with a soft chuckle, then, more seriously. How's Lisa? Nervous but excited, Nina replied. I think she'll be okay. Malcolm wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close, a comforting anchor in the shifting currents of their new life. And how are you? Nina sighed, nestling into his embrace. The same, I guess. Nervous but excited. She paused, then added softly, a fragile question hanging in the air. I hope we made the right decision, Malcolm. We did, he said firmly, his voice a steady reassurance. It might not be easy at first, but we're together. We can handle anything, as long as we have each other. As they drifted off to sleep, the house settled around them, creaking and sighing as if adjusting to its new occupants. Outside, the stars twinkled, a silent promise of fresh starts and the potential for both trials and triumphs in the days that lay ahead. The nascent morning sun, a pale disk in the still-waking sky, cast long, elongated shadows across the asphalt driveway. Nina and Malcolm stood sentinel with Lisa, their collective breath held in quiet anticipation, awaiting the arrival of the school bus. Lisa, her small frame dwarfed by her new backpack, clutched its straps tightly, her eyes, wide with a mixture of apprehension and excitement, darting up and down the quiet street. You've got your lunch? Nina asked, her voice laced with a mother's familiar anxiety, as she smoothed Lisa's hair for what felt like the 10th time. Lisa nodded, patting her backpack with a small, reassuring thump. And my notebook and pencils. And you're all set, champ. Malcolm interjected gently, kneeling down to Lisa's level, his voice a warm embrace. Remember what we talked about? Lisa's face, usually so animated, grew serious as she recited the familiar mantra. Be myself, be kind, and if anything makes me uncomfortable, tell a teacher or you guys right away. Malcolm smiled, a flash of white against his tired face, and gave her a quick, affirming hug. That's my girl. The distant rumble of an engine, a low growl that grew steadily louder, caught their attention as the bright yellow school bus rounded the corner. Nina felt her heart quicken, a frantic drum against her ribs. This was it, the moment they had both anticipated and, in the deepest recesses of their hearts, dreaded. The bus pulled to a halt, its accordion doors hissing open like a reluctant beast. The driver, a middle-aged white man with an incongruous halo of graying hair, looked down at them. A flicker of surprise, swift as a hummingbird's wing, crossed his face, quickly replaced by a neutral, almost impassive expression. Good morning, he said, his tone polite but devoid of warmth. You must be new to the route. Nina nodded, forcing a smile that fell brittle on her lips. Yes, we just moved in. This is Lisa. She'll be riding with you. The driver nodded curtly. Welcome aboard, Lisa. I'm Mr. Miller. Lisa hesitated for a fleeting moment, her gaze darting back to her parents. Nina offered an encouraging nod, a silent plea for bravery, and Malcolm whispered, You've got this, sweetheart. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, Lisa climbed the daunting steps. As she disappeared into the cavernous interior of the bus, Nina and Malcolm caught a fleeting glimpse of the other children inside. Most seemed curious, their young faces alight with innocent inquiry. A few offered tentative smiles, but one or two wore expressions that made Nina's stomach clench, a cold not a foreboding. As the bus pulled away, a yellow behemoth lumbering down the street, Nina and Malcolm stood hand in hand, watching until it vanished around the corner, leaving behind only the fading echo of its engine. "She'll be fine," Malcolm said, giving Nina's hand a reassuring squeeze, but the tremor in his voice, faint yet discernible, mirrored the nascent worry in Nina's heart. The days stretched out interminably for Nina. She attempted to immerse herself in setting up her home office, but her thoughts, like restless birds, continually flitted back to Lisa. Was she making friends? Were the teachers kind? Was she feeling out of place, an outsider in this new, unfamiliar world? When the time came for Lisa's return, Nina found herself pacing by the front window, a silent sentinel, her gaze fixed on the street. The familiar rumble of the bus engine, a sound that had once been mundane, now sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She hurried to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Lisa bounded down the bus steps, her backpack bouncing with each energetic stride. Nina's heart lifted at the sight of her daughter's unadulterated smile. "Hi, Mom!" Lisa called, waving as she ran up the driveway. "Hi, sweetie. How was your first day?" Nina asked, enveloping Lisa in a warm, comforting hug. Lisa's excitement was palpable as she recounted her day, a rapid-fire succession of details. Her nice teacher, the girl she sat next to at lunch, the thrilling playground equipment. Nina listened, a wave of profound relief washing over her. It seemed, against all her internal anxieties, that things had gone well. That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Lisa continued to share stories from her day, her voice animated and full of youthful exuberance. Malcolm, home from his own first day at his new job, listened intently, interjecting with questions and laughter at Lisa's vivid descriptions. As the conversation lulled, a sudden, unexpected silence descended. Then Lisa, her voice small and tentative, said, "Our bus driver is rude." Nina and Malcolm exchanged surprised glances, a silent question passing between them. "What do you mean, honey?" Nina asked carefully, her voice soft, exploratory. Lisa shrugged, suddenly looking uncomfortable, her gaze falling to her plate. "He just says mean things sometimes," she mumbled, then quickly changed the subject, asking Malcolm about his new office. Nina caught Malcolm's eye over Lisa's head, seeing her own nascent concern reflected there, amplified. But they didn't press her, unwilling to dampen the otherwise positive glow of Lisa's first day. Later that night, as Nina and Malcolm prepared for bed, Malcolm brought it up, the quiet weight of Lisa's words heavy between them. "What do you think Lisa meant about the bus driver?" Nina sighed, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "I don't know. It could be nothing. Maybe he's just gruff. But it could be something." Malcolm finished for her, his voice a low rumble. "Should we ask her more about it?" Nina shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion. "Not yet. Let's give it a few days, see if she mentions anything else. We don't want to make her anxious if it's nothing." Malcolm nodded, but Nina could see the worry lines, faint yet discernible, etching themselves onto his forehead. She felt it too, that persistent, nagging sense that something was not quite right, a discordant note in the otherwise harmonious melody of their new life. But for now, all they could do was wait and watch. As they settled into bed, backs turned to each other, a chasm of unspoken worry stretching between them, Nina found herself staring at the ceiling, her mind a relentless reel of Lisa's words. "He just says mean things sometimes." What kind of mean things? And why? The question swirled in her mind, a relentless tide, keeping sleep at bay long into the silent watches of the night. The weeks that followed Nina's initial unease settled into a fragile, deceptive rhythm. Malcolm departed early each morning for his lengthy commute, a silent testament to their commitment to this new life, while Nina immersed herself in her newly established home office. Lisa, with the resilience of youth, continued to ride the bus to and from school, and life in their new home, against all odds, began to feel normal. Yet beneath the serene surface of this burgeoning routine, Nina found herself unable to shake a growing, persistent sense of unease. She began to notice subtle shifts in Lisa's demeanor. The bubbly, talkative girl who had once excitedly recounted every minute detail of her first days at school now offered only brief, non-committal answers when asked about her day. One afternoon, as Nina took a much-needed break from the intricate tapestry of her design work, she discovered Lisa sitting by the living room window, her small body hunched, her gaze distant, lost in some unseen world. "Lisa?" Nina called softly, her voice a gentle query. "Is everything okay?" Lisa startled slightly, as if roused from a deep, troubled dream. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine," she said, but her smile, like a poorly drawn sketch, didn't quite reach her eyes. Nina sat down beside her daughter, her fingers gently stroking Lisa's dark, curly hair. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's bothering you at school, or with friends, or—" She trailed off, a silent invitation hanging in the air, hoping Lisa would fill in the unspoken blank. But Lisa merely nodded, leaning into her mother's comforting touch without uttering a single word. That evening, with Malcolm working late, Nina decided to delicately broach the subject again. She sat beside Lisa on the couch, casually inquiring about her day. When Lisa gave her usual terse, almost dismissive answers, Nina gently brought up the bus driver comment from weeks ago, her tone carefully light, non-confrontational. "Remember when you mentioned that the bus driver sometimes says mean things?" Nina asked, her voice a soft murmur. "Has anything like that happened again?" Lisa tensed visibly, her small hands fidgeting restlessly with the hem of her shirt. "It's nothing, Mommy," she insisted, but her voice, a fragile thread, quivered slightly. Nina noticed Lisa's eyes darting around, almost as if she feared an unseen listener, a hidden presence. The sight sent a sharp pang through Nina's heart. What was her daughter so afraid of? "Lisa, sweetheart," Nina said, cupping Lisa's face gently in her hands, her gaze steady, unwavering. "You know you can tell me anything, right? If someone is being mean to you, or if you're scared about something, I want to know. I'm here to help you." For a moment, a fragile hope flickered within Nina. It seemed as though Lisa might finally open up. Her lower lip trembled, and a sheen of tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vulnerability vanished, replaced by a forced, brittle smile. Lisa pulled away, the invisible shield slamming back into place. "I'm fine, Mom, really. Can I go play in my room now?" Nina nodded, her heart a heavy stone in her chest as she watched Lisa hurry away. Something was undeniably wrong, but she felt utterly helpless, a ship adrift in a sea of unspoken fears. When Malcolm finally returned home that night, exhaustion etched onto his face, Nina shared her observations as they prepared dinner together. She recounted Lisa's strange, withdrawn behavior, the unsettling premonition that gnawed at her, and her futile attempts to coax Lisa into revealing her burden. Malcolm listened, stirring the pasta sauce with a methodical rhythm, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. When Nina finished, he sighed heavily, the sound a weary exhalation. "Nina, I think you might be overreacting," he said, his voice tired, strained. "Lisa is just adjusting. It's a big change for all of us." Nina felt a flare of frustration, a spark igniting in her chest. "But Malcolm, you haven't seen how she's been acting." "I really think—" Malcolm cut her off, his voice rising slightly, an edge of exasperation entering his tone. "I have enough problems at work, Nina. I don't need you bringing this up again. Just let it go. Lisa's fine. Don't make this into something it's not." The kitchen fell silent, save for the gentle bubbling of the sauce on the stove. Nina turned away, a sharp ache of hurt and anger piercing her. She felt unsupported, invalidated. Malcolm immediately regretted his outburst, the harsh words hanging in the air between them, yet he found himself unable to retract them. They finished preparing dinner in a strained, uncomfortable silence. When Lisa joined them at the table, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Lisa looked from one parent to the other, her young mind sensing the emotional chasm that had opened. "Is everything okay?" she asked hesitantly, her voice small. Everything's fine, sweetheart, Malcolm said quickly, forcing a brittle smile. How was your day? As Lisa launched into a carefully edited, sanitized version of her day, Nina pushed her food around her plate, her appetite utterly gone. She caught Malcolm's apologetic glance, a silent plea for forgiveness, but she couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. That night, as they lay in bed, backs turned to each other, the unspoken tension a palpable third presence, Nina couldn't sleep. She replayed Lisa's words, her subtle actions, the shifting nuances of her daughter's behavior. Her maternal instinct screamed, a primal, insistent warning, that something was profoundly wrong. But Malcolm's dismissal of her concerns left her feeling isolated, adrift, unsure. What if she was overreacting? What if Lisa was merely navigating the natural anxieties of a new environment? But then, why this persistent, icy dread in the pit of her stomach? Nina tossed and turned, her mind racing, a frenzied kaleidoscope of thoughts. She thought about the bus driver, Mr. Miller, his neutral expression, his seemingly polite words. She thought about Lisa's changing demeanor, the way her daughter seemed to retreat deeper into herself with each passing day. There had to be a connection, a thread linking these disparate observations, but what was it? As the first faint light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, painting the room in shades of gray, Nina made a resolute decision. If no one else would heed her concerns, if her husband dismissed her maternal intuition as mere overreaction, then she would uncover the truth herself. Tomorrow, she would take matters into her own hands, guided by an unwavering conviction that her daughter's safety hinged on her actions. With this silent, unshakable resolution, Nina finally drifted into a fitful, troubled sleep, utterly unaware of the seismic events that would unfold in the coming days, events that would shake their family to its very core and irrevocably alter their lives in this seemingly idyllic neighborhood. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, a somber reflection of Nina's mood as she moved through the familiar motions of getting Lisa ready for school. Malcolm had already departed for work, the lingering tension from the previous night's arguments still a palpable presence, a silent weight in the air. As Lisa climbed onto the bus, her small figure momentarily silhouetted against the morning light, Nina waved with a complex mixture of gnawing worry and steely determination. Today would be different. Today, she would uncover the truth of what was truly happening. The moment the bus pulled away, a lumbering yellow beast disappearing around the bend, Nina sprang into action. She grabbed her car keys and a light jacket, her heart hammering against her ribs with a frantic rhythm, a symphony of anxiety and unwavering resolve. As she locked the front door behind her, the click of the latch sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet morning, Nina slid into the driver's seat of her car, her hands trembling almost imperceptibly as she turned the key in the ignition. As she pulled out of the driveway, she caught sight of a neighbor, a woman with a kind smile, watering her meticulously manicured lawn. The woman waved, and Nina forced a brittle smile in return, hoping her clandestine actions wouldn't arouse suspicion. She maintained a safe, discreet distance as she shadowed the bright yellow school bus through the winding suburban streets, a silent, unseen sentinel. Her heart raced, a frantic drumbeat in her ears, and she felt an equal measure of steely determination and a quiet sense of the ridiculous. What if Malcolm was right, and she was merely overreacting, succumbing to the anxieties of a new environment? But what if he was wrong, and Lisa was, in fact, in genuine trouble? The bus made its usual stops, a series of brief pauses as it gathered children along its designated route. Nina noticed something subtle, yet undeniably odd. At each stop, Lisa consistently seemed to be the last to board, even when other children were waiting at the same stop. Was this a mere coincidence, a quirk of the route, or was there something more sinister at play? At one point, Nina thought she saw Mr. Miller, the bus driver, lean down and say something to Lisa as she climbed the steps, her small shoulders seeming to hunch slightly. But from this distance, shrouded by the tinted glass of her car and the morning mist, Nina couldn't be certain if she was merely imagining things, if her anxieties were conjuring phantom interactions. When they finally reached the school, its brick facade standing stoically against the gray sky, Nina parked across the street, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white. She watched, a silent observer, as the children disembarked. Mr. Miller, his distinctive graying hair visible even from this distance, helped the kids off the bus with a practiced, seemingly benevolent smile. When it was Lisa's turn, he even offered a friendly, almost paternal pat on her shoulder. Nina felt a confusing, disorienting mix of relief and bewilderment. From what she could discern, Mr. Miller appeared perfectly kind, professional, his interactions with Lisa seemingly normal, even friendly. So why, then, had Lisa said he was rude? Why did she seem so utterly uncomfortable talking about him? As she drove home, the mundane suburban landscape blurring past, Nina tried desperately to reconcile what she'd witnessed with the insistent, nagging feeling in her gut. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe Lisa was just having trouble adjusting to the new school and neighborhood. But a persistent, stubborn doubt remained, a tiny, gnawing seed of suspicion. What if Mr. Miller had noticed her following, and in a calculated move, altered his behavior, presenting a facade of geniality? Back at home, Nina attempted to immerse herself in her work, to lose herself in the intricate details of her designs, but her mind, a restless kaleidoscope of images and questions, kept drifting back to what she'd witnessed, what she'd felt. She couldn't shake the unnerving feeling that she was missing something crucial, a vital piece of the puzzle. The fragments were there, scattered before her, but she couldn't quite make them fit together into a coherent whole. As the day wore on, Nina's thoughts churned, a relentless mill. Should she confide in Malcolm about her impromptu stakeout? Would he understand her burgeoning concerns? Or would he be angry that she'd acted without his knowledge, that she'd gone behind his back? And what about Lisa? Should she confront her daughter directly about what was truly going on, risking further withdrawal, further silence? By the time Lisa returned home from school, her small figure framed in the doorway, Nina had made a resolute decision. She wouldn't mention her impromptu investigation to anyone. Not yet. She needed more information, more concrete evidence, before she could act, before she could articulate the formless dread that was slowly consuming her. "How was school today, sweetie?" Nina asked, her voice carefully neutral, as Lisa walked through the door. Lisa shrugged, her usual, almost dismissive response these days. "Fine," she mumbled, already heading towards her room, a small, retreating figure. Nina watched her go, her heart heavy, burdened by unspoken fears. Something was definitely wrong, but what? And how could she help her daughter if Lisa, for reasons unknown, refused to confide in her? That night, as the family sat down to dinner, the subtle tension between Nina and Malcolm still present, Nina observed Lisa closely, her gaze keen, searching. She noticed how her daughter merely pushed her food around her plate, how she meticulously avoided eye contact, how she seemed to shrink into herself, to become almost imperceptibly smaller, whenever Malcolm innocently inquired about her day. After dinner, as Malcolm cleared the table, his movements precise and deliberate, Nina approached Lisa. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice a gentle invitation. "Want to watch a movie together?" Lisa hesitated for a moment, her small shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly, then nodded. As they settled onto the couch, the soft glow of the television casting dancing shadows on the walls, Nina pulled her daughter close, a protective embrace. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, the only sounds the faint murmur of the movie and the gentle rhythm of their breathing. "You know I love you, right?" Nina said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper, a fragile question floating in the air. Lisa looked up at her, surprise widening her eyes. "I know, Mom. I love you too." Nina hugged her tighter, a fierce, protective grip. "And you know you can tell me anything. Anything at all." For a fleeting moment, Nina thought she saw a flicker of something in Lisa's eyes, fear, perhaps, or a deep, unarticulated sadness. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, replaced by a forced, almost practiced smile. "I know, Mom," Lisa said, turning her attention back to the movie, her small body stiff against Nina's. Nina sighed inwardly, a silent exhalation of frustration. She hadn't broken through. Not yet. But she wouldn't give up. Something was deeply, profoundly wrong, and she was utterly determined to uncover the truth, to pierce the veil of silence that shrouded her daughter. She would protect her daughter, no matter the cost. As Lisa finally drifted off to sleep in her arms, her small body warm and pliant against Nina's, Nina made a silent, unbreakable promise. She would get to the bottom of this, with or without Malcolm's full support. She would discover what was truly happening with Mr. Miller and those unsettling bus rides, and she would ensure her daughter was safe, no matter what it took. Little did Nina know that the truth, when it finally emerged, would be far more shocking, far more heartbreaking, than anything she could have ever imagined. The events of the coming days would test their family in ways they never thought possible, forcing them to confront harsh, brutal realities about their new life in this seemingly idyllic neighborhood, shattering the illusion of their perfect suburban dream. The following afternoon, Nina found herself at the local park, her gaze unfocused, absently watching Lisa as she soared on the swings, her laughter, a fleeting sound, carried on the gentle breeze. Nina's mind was still a chaotic whirlwind of questions and concerns, a relentless echo of the previous day's unsettling observations. As she sat there, lost in the labyrinth of her thoughts, a voice, gentle yet firm, startled her back to reality. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Nina looked up to see one of her neighbors, a middle-aged white woman she vaguely recognized from down the street, her face framed by a halo of neatly coiffed blonde hair. The woman smiled warmly, a flash of white teeth, and gestured to the empty space on the bench beside Nina. "Mind if I join you?" Nina nodded, forcing a brittle smile that felt alien on her lips. "Of course not. Please sit down." As the woman settled beside her, the soft rustle of her clothing a faint sound, Nina's mind raced, a frantic whirring. Here, finally, was an opportunity, a chance to gain another perspective, to ascertain whether her concerns were, in fact, justified, or if she was indeed, as Malcolm had suggested, merely overreacting. "I'm Sarah, by the way," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "I think we're just a few houses down from you." "Nina," she replied, shaking Sarah's hand, her grip firm. "Nice to meet you properly." They chatted amiably for a few minutes, the conversation a polite dance around the mundane, the neighborhood, the capricious weather, the inherent challenges of transplanting oneself to a new, unfamiliar place. Nina found herself relaxing slightly, a small measure of gratitude for the friendly, innocuous conversation. Finally, gathering every ounce of her courage, Nina decided to delicately broach the subject that had been a relentless, consuming presence in her thoughts. "Sarah," she began hesitantly, her voice barely a whisper, a fragile thread of sound. "Can I ask you something? It's about the school bus driver, Mr. Miller." Sarah's eyebrows, meticulously shaped, raised ever so slightly, a fleeting expression of curiosity, but she nodded, a silent, encouraging invitation to continue. Nina took a deep, fortifying breath, choosing her words with meticulous care, as if selecting precious jewels. "Lisa, my daughter, she mentioned the bus driver being rude. I've been a little concerned about how he treats the kids. I was wondering if you've heard anything similar from other parents, or your own children." The change in Sarah's demeanor was immediate and utterly shocking. Her friendly smile, a mask of geniality, vanished, replaced by a hard, angry expression that made Nina recoil instinctively, a cold dread seeping into her veins. "How dare you?" Sarah hissed, her voice low, a venomous whisper, yet filled with an astonishing, chilling fury. "How dare you accuse Mr. Miller of anything? He's been driving the kids in this neighborhood for decades. He's a good man." Nina was stunned into complete, utter silence, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly, a fish out of water, as Sarah continued her tirade, her words a torrent of accusation. "You just came into this neighborhood and you're already causing trouble, thinking you're the boss around here?" Sarah spat, her face flushed with a furious indignation. "If you don't like it, you're free to leave. I think you'd be doing everyone here a favor anyway." The words hit Nina like a physical blow, a brutal assault. The thinly veiled racism in Sarah's explosive outburst left her feeling sick to her stomach, a corrosive acid churning within her. She had suspected, in the quiet corners of her mind, that not everyone in the neighborhood would be genuinely welcoming, but the raw, unbridled hostility in Sarah's voice was beyond anything she had ever dared to imagine. I'm sorry, Nina managed to stammer, her voice trembling, as she rose from the bench on shaky legs. I didn't mean to offend anyone. I was just concerned about my daughter. Sarah stood as well, her eyes, once seemingly kind, now cold and unforgiving. Well, maybe you should teach your daughter to show some respect instead of making up stories about good people. With that, Sarah turned sharply on her heel and stalked away, her retreating figure a blur of angry motion, leaving Nina standing utterly alone, feeling as if the very ground had been pulled out from under her feet, leaving her suspended in a terrifying void. Across the playground, Lisa had stopped swinging, her small body frozen, and was watching the unfolding scene with wide, worried eyes, absorbing every nuance of the tense exchange. Nina forced herself to conjure a reassuring smile for her daughter, a fragile facade of calm, even as her mind reeled from the brutal encounter. As they walked home, hand in hand, the silence between them heavy with unspoken truths, Nina's thoughts were in a tumultuous uproar. Sarah's reaction had been so extreme, so disproportionate to a simple, innocent question. Was this how the entire neighborhood perceived them? Were they seen as troublemakers, as unwanted intruders, simply for existing here, for daring to be different? More importantly, what did this harrowing encounter portend for Lisa's fragile situation? If this was how an adult reacted to a mere query about Mr. Miller, how would they respond if Lisa, in her innocent bravery, ever came forward with a truly serious complaint, a genuine plea for help? That night, after Lisa had finally drifted off to sleep, her small room a sanctuary of quiet breathing, Nina sat alone in the living room, the muted glow of the streetlights casting long, distorted shadows, turning the day's dramatic events over and over in her mind, a relentless, painful churning. She hadn't told Malcolm about her chilling conversation with Sarah. She couldn't bear to witness the "I told you so" expression in his eyes, to endure his inevitable dismissal of her concerns if he once again invalidated her intuition. But now, more than ever, Nina was utterly convinced that something was deeply, profoundly wrong. The pieces of the puzzle still didn't quite fit together, but Sarah's vitriolic overreaction had only served to harden Nina's resolve, to strengthen her unwavering determination to unearth the truth of what was truly happening. As she finally headed to bed, exhaustion, a heavy cloak, weighing heavily upon her, Nina made a silent, unshakable decision. She would continue to investigate on her own. She would watch, she would listen, she would meticulously gather every shred of evidence she could. And when she had enough to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that her concerns were not only valid but vitally important, she would confront Malcolm, she would confront the school, and she would confront anyone else who dared to stand in the way of protecting her precious daughter. Little did Nina know that the truth she so desperately sought would come crashing down on their family far sooner, and far more dramatically, than she could have ever anticipated. The seemingly insignificant event set in motion by her simple, innocent question to Sarah would snowball into a full-blown crisis, a relentless tide that would test their family's strength beyond anything they had ever known, challenge their deeply held beliefs, and irrevocably alter their lives in this new, deceptively tranquil community. The shrill, insistent ring of the doorbell, a jarring intrusion, ripped through the tense, heavy atmosphere that clung to the Johnson household like a suffocating shroud. Malcolm, his jaw set in a grim line of unshakable determination, strode purposefully to the door and opened it, revealing two figures silhouetted against the encroaching twilight. A tall, middle-aged white man, his demeanor professional and unyielding, and a younger black woman, her eyes sharp and perceptive. "Good evening, sir," the male officer said, his voice even, yet not entirely devoid of a measured kindness. "I'm Officer Thompson, and this is my partner, Officer Brooks. We received a call about a missing child." Malcolm nodded, a tight, almost imperceptible movement, and ushered them inside, the air crackling with unspoken urgency. "Yes, that was us, but our daughter is home now. However, we have a situation we need to report." As they stepped into the living room, its familiar comforts now imbued with an unsettling tension, Nina stood, still holding Lisa close, a protective shield against the world. Officer Brooks, the younger, observant officer, immediately knelt down to Lisa's level, her movements fluid and gentle. "Hi there," she said softly, her voice a warm, reassuring presence. "You must be Lisa. I'm glad to see you're safe. Is it okay if we ask you and your parents some questions about what happened today?" Lisa nodded hesitantly, her small hand clutching Nina's, a desperate anchor in a storm. Over the next harrowing hour, the family meticulously recounted the day's terrifying events and the insidious, ongoing issues they had endured with Mr. Miller. Officer Thompson took meticulous notes, his expression an unreadable mask, while Officer Brooks, her gaze compassionate and unwavering, gently encouraged Lisa to share as much as she felt comfortable with, her words a soothing balm. As Lisa finished her fragmented, painful story, a heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the room, broken only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Officer Thompson cleared his throat, the sound a low rumble. "That's quite an accusation," he said, his tone carefully neutral, betraying neither belief nor skepticism. "Mr. Miller has been a respected member of this community for decades." Nina felt a fierce surge of anger, a hot, indignant flame igniting within her. "Are you saying you don't believe our daughter?" she demanded, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence. Officer Brooks quickly interjected, her voice firm, yet understanding. "What my partner means is that we need to investigate thoroughly. This is a serious allegation, and we need to handle it carefully." Malcolm, who had remained stoically silent for most of the interview, his face a mask of controlled rage, finally spoke up, his voice low and unwavering. "We understand that. But our daughter has been traumatized. We need to know that you're taking this seriously." Officer Thompson nodded, though his expression remained stubbornly skeptical, a subtle crease between his brows. "We'll need to speak with Mr. Miller, of course, and we'll need to corroborate Lisa's story. Are there any other children who might have witnessed anything?" Lisa shook her head, fresh tears welling up in her eyes, shimmering like fragile pearls. "Mr. Miller always made sure I was the last one on the bus," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a mournful confession. Nina's heart clenched, a painful vice. How long had this insidious torment been ongoing? How had they, her parents, failed to notice, to protect her? As the officers prepared to leave, their presence a stark reminder of the gravity of the situation, Nina made a sudden, unyielding decision. "We want to go with you," she said firmly, her voice devoid of hesitation. "When you talk to Mr. Miller, we want to be there." Officer Thompson looked visibly uncomfortable, his gaze shifting uncomfortably. "Ma'am, that's not really protocol." "I don't care about protocol," Nina interrupted, her voice rising, infused with a fierce, maternal protectiveness. "This is our daughter we're talking about. We need to see this through." After a moment of pregnant hesitation, Officer Brooks, her eyes a beacon of understanding, nodded. "All right. You can come with us, but you'll need to stay in the car while we speak with Mr. Miller." As they drove through the quiet, tree-lined suburban streets, the familiar landscape now imbued with a chilling sense of dread, Nina's mind raced, a tumultuous torrent of thoughts. She knew where the bus driver lived, just 2 streets away, a proximity that had once seemed a convenient quirk, but now felt undeniably threatening, a chilling closeness. They pulled up in front of a modest, 2-story house, its lawn meticulously manicured, a picture of suburban normalcy. Nina felt a sudden, visceral surge of anger at the sheer ordinariness of it all. How could someone who had inflicted such profound pain on her daughter live in such an unremarkable, seemingly innocent place? As promised, Nina and Malcolm remained in the car with Lisa, a silent, watchful trio, while the officers approached the house. Through the window, they watched, their breaths held, as Mr. Miller answered the door, his expression shifting from initial confusion to defensive indignation as the officers spoke, their words unheard but their intent clear. After what felt like an eternity, a slow, agonizing crawl of time, the officers returned to the car. Officer Thompson's face was grim, a thundercloud of resignation. "Mr. Miller denies everything," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Says he's never mistreated any child, let alone singled one out. Nina felt a wave of crushing despair wash over her, a cold, sickening realization. Was this how it would end? With their daughter's pain dismissed, her trauma invalidated, swallowed by the cold, unforgiving maw of disbelief? But before she could voice her frustration, a sudden commotion caught their attention. A woman, her stride purposeful, was hurrying across the street, waving frantically to capture the officer's attention. "Wait!" she called out, her voice slightly breathless, yet urgent. "I need to talk to you." As the woman approached, her features growing clearer in the fading light, Nina recognized her with a jolt of startled recognition. It was another mother from the neighborhood, one of the few other black families in the area, a face seen occasionally at the grocery store or the park. "I couldn't help overhearing," the woman said, her voice laced with a quiet yet fierce determination. "And I need to tell you this woman is right. We've experienced something similar with our 2 kids. We didn't have the courage to speak up and just decided to drive the kids ourselves instead of letting them ride with the bus driver." Nina felt a sudden, exhilarating surge of hope, a powerful, almost overwhelming rush. Here, finally, was the corroboration they so desperately needed, the undeniable proof that would shatter Mr. Miller's carefully constructed facade of innocence. She watched, her heart pounding with a renewed vigor, as the officer's expressions underwent a dramatic transformation. Officer Thompson's initial skepticism, a wall of ingrained doubt, began to crumble, giving way to a genuine, dawning concern. Officer Brooks's eyes, already perceptive, narrowed with a renewed, fierce determination. "Ma'am, we're going to need to take an official statement from you," Officer Brooks said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "This changes things significantly." As the woman nodded her agreement, a silent pledge of solidarity, Nina caught her eye. In that profound, shared moment, a look of deep understanding passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared fear, of the relentless burden of wanting to protect their children in a world that didn't always see their worth, that often sought to diminish their existence. The next few hours passed in a surreal blur, a chaotic maelstrom of activity. More officers arrived, their vehicles casting an eerie blue and red glow on the street. Mr. Miller was taken in for questioning, his initial bluster giving way to a sullen, resentful silence. Other families in the neighborhood, emboldened by the unfolding, undeniable events, came forward with their own heart-wrenching stories of discrimination, of subtle slights, of thinly veiled mistreatment. As dawn, a pale, hopeful light, finally broke, painting the sky in hues of rose and lavender, Nina stood on her front porch, a silent witness, watching as Mr. Miller, his face a mask of defeat, was led away in handcuffs. The sight brought a complex, almost overwhelming mix of emotions, a profound sense of relief, a triumphant vindication, but also a deep, aching sadness at the harsh, undeniable reality of the world they inhabited. Malcolm joined her, his arm wrapping around her shoulders, a comforting, anchoring presence. "It's over," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. But Nina shook her head, a slow, deliberate movement. "No," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet, unshakable determination. "It's just beginning. We have a lot of work to do to make sure this never happens again. Not to Lisa. Not to any child." As they turned to go back inside, where Lisa, finally free from her torment, was sleeping peacefully, a profound, restorative sleep, Nina knew, with a fierce certainty, that their fight was far from over. But they had taken the crucial first step. They had spoken up, they had stood their ground against entrenched prejudice and a subtle, insidious bigotry, and they had made their voices heard, refusing to be silenced. And in doing so, they had not only protected their beloved daughter, but had, against all odds, pried open the door for profound, systemic change in their community. It wouldn't be easy, she knew. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, with resistance. But Nina was ready for the arduous, uphill battle. For Lisa. For every child who had ever felt scared or unwelcome, diminished or unheard. They would continue to fight, relentlessly, for justice and acceptance, for a world where every child, regardless of their skin color, could feel safe, valued, and truly, unequivocally at home. In the tumultuous days that followed Mr. Miller's arrest, the Johnson family found themselves unwittingly at the epicenter of a community in a profound state of turmoil. The story, like wildfire, spread with astonishing rapidity, igniting passionate debates, dividing opinions sharply, and stirring up long-buried tensions that had festered beneath the surface of their seemingly placid suburban existence. Nina stood at her living room window, a silent, watchful sentinel, observing a small contingent of reporters, their cameras flashing like predatory eyes, camped out on their front lawn. The quiet suburban street, the very haven she had once desperately hoped would be a peaceful, unassailable sanctuary for her family, had, with a cruel twist of fate, transformed into a battleground, a public spectacle. "Mom?" Lisa's small voice, a fragile question, came from behind her, pulling Nina gently from her somber contemplation. "Are those people going to be there all day?" Nina turned, forcing a brittle smile for her daughter, a mask of calm composure. "Don't worry about them, sweetheart. They'll go away soon." But even as she uttered the reassuring words, Nina wasn't entirely convinced she believed them herself. The media frenzy had been intense, a ravenous beast, with local and even some national outlets seizing upon their painful, intimate experience, reducing it to sensationalized sound bites. "Racist bus driver terrorizes black child," the headlines screamed, their bold pronouncements cheapening the profound agony they had endured, trivializing their deeply personal trauma. Malcolm entered the room, his face etched with the deep lines of worry, a silent testament to the sleepless nights and relentless anxieties. "I just got off the phone with the lawyer," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble. "The prosecution is moving forward with the case. They want Lisa to testify." Nina's heart clenched, a painful spasm. The very thought of her precious daughter, her brave, resilient child, having to relive her agonizing trauma in front of a courtroom filled with a sea of unfamiliar, scrutinizing faces was almost unbearable, a torment beyond measure. But she knew, with a grim, unyielding certainty, that it might be an absolute necessity to ensure that justice, in its purest, most unwavering form, was ultimately served. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Nina said, her voice steady despite the internal tremor, as she pulled Lisa close, a protective, comforting embrace. "For now, let's focus on healing." But healing, they quickly discovered, proved to be an excruciatingly complex, multifaceted process, not just for their immediate family, but for the entire community, a collective wound festering beneath the veneer of suburban complacency. As more families, emboldened by the undeniable truth that had finally emerged, stepped forward with their own haunting stories of insidious discrimination and systemic mistreatment, it became chillingly clear that Mr. Miller's deplorable actions were not merely an isolated incident, but rather a profoundly disturbing symptom of a deeper, far more pervasive systemic problem, a festering wound within the very fabric of their seemingly harmonious society. The school board, bowing to immense public pressure, called an emergency meeting, which Nina and Malcolm, their resolve unwavering, attended, along with dozens of other concerned, angry parents. The atmosphere in the auditorium was thick with tension, a suffocating weight, with accusations and furious counter-accusations flying through the air like poison darts, each word laced with a palpable bitterness. "We need to implement better screening processes for all school staff," one parent demanded, their voice raw with indignation. "This is just one isolated incident," another argued, their voice tinged with a dismissive skepticism. "We can't overreact and change everything because of one bad apple." Nina listened patiently, her frustration growing with each passing, heated exchange. Finally, she could bear it no longer. She stood up, her presence commanding, her voice cutting through the chaotic din with a clear, unwavering force. "This isn't about one incident or one person," she said firmly, her gaze sweeping across the diverse faces gathered before her. "This is about creating a community where all our children feel safe and valued, truly seen and respected. We need to look at the bigger picture, at the insidious biases and deeply ingrained prejudices that allowed this to happen in the first place, that enabled this injustice to fester in our midst." Her words, infused with a raw, undeniable truth, seemed to strike a chord, reverberating through the hushed auditorium, silencing the dissenting voices. In the days that followed, a powerful, unexpected alliance formed, a diverse group of parents, both black and white, united by a shared purpose, established a dedicated diversity and inclusion committee. They immediately began working on comprehensive proposals for mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all school staff, for more diverse and equitable hiring practices within the school district, and for a new, transparent system for reporting and addressing concerns from both students and parents. At home, Nina and Malcolm, their focus unwavering, dedicated themselves entirely to helping Lisa heal from the profound, insidious trauma she had endured. They found a compassionate therapist who specialized in working with children who had experienced racial trauma, a safe space for Lisa to process her pain and fear. Slowly, painstakingly, yet undeniably, they began to see the gradual reemergence of their vibrant, confident daughter, glimpses of the bright, inquisitive spirit that had been temporarily dimmed. One sunny afternoon, as Nina was patiently helping Lisa with her homework, a soft, familiar knock sounded at the front door. She opened it to find Sarah, the neighbor who had so cruelly lashed out at her in the park weeks ago, standing on their porch, her eyes downcast, a palpable sense of shame radiating from her. I owe you an apology," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, her words laced with a profound regret. "I was wrong to dismiss your concerns. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you." Nina was taken aback by the unexpected, heartfelt apology. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of raw hurt, she was tempted to simply shut the door in Sarah's face, to reject the fragile olive branch being extended. But then, she thought of Lisa, of the more just, more inclusive world they were so desperately striving to create for her. "Thank you for saying that," Nina said finally, her voice soft yet firm. "It means a lot." It was a small step, almost imperceptible in the grand scheme of things, but it was, undeniably, a deeply significant one, a glimmer of hope. As the weeks inexorably stretched into months, Nina witnessed more such steps being taken throughout the community, small yet profound gestures of healing and progress. The school, true to its word, implemented new, far-reaching policies, including the installation of cameras on all school buses and the establishment of a fully anonymous reporting system for both students and parents, ensuring that no child's voice would ever again be silenced. Mr. Miller's trial, a somber, weighty affair, came and went, with the brave, compelling testimony of multiple families and the irrefutable evidence meticulously gathered by the police. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced, his reign of terror brought to a definitive, undeniable end. The very day the verdict was announced, Nina held Lisa close, her embrace fiercely protective, whispering, "You did it, baby. You were so brave. And you helped make sure he can't hurt anyone else." Lisa looked up at her mother, a small, tentative smile playing on her lips, a radiant glimmer of hope in her eyes. "We did it, Mom," she said, her voice soft, yet filled with a burgeoning strength. "All of us. Together." As spring, a vibrant, optimistic force, bloomed, bringing with it the promise of new life and the scent of freshly unfurling leaves to the neighborhood, Nina felt a profound sense of cautious optimism, a fragile yet persistent hope. There was still arduous work to be done, she knew, many more challenges to be faced, but they had made a conscious, courageous choice to stay, to be an integral part of the very change they so desperately wanted to see, to embody the principles of justice and inclusion. One sunny afternoon, Nina watched from her porch, her gaze filled with a quiet satisfaction, as Lisa boarded the school bus. The new driver, a kind-faced woman of color, greeted each child with a warm, genuine smile, her voice a soothing melody. Lisa turned and waved to her mother, her small hand a blur of enthusiastic motion, before taking her seat, chatting animatedly with a diverse group of friends, their laughter, a joyous symphony, filling the air. Nina waved back, her heart full, overflowing with a quiet, profound pride. They had faced the darkness, the insidious forces of prejudice, and against all odds, they had emerged on the other side, stronger, more resilient. They had, with unwavering courage, transformed a painful, traumatic experience into an extraordinary opportunity for profound growth and meaningful, lasting change. And most importantly, they had shown Lisa, and indeed everyone else, the immeasurable, transformative power of standing up for what is unequivocally right, no matter how daunting, how difficult, or how seemingly insurmountable the challenge may appear. As the bus pulled away, a yellow beacon of hope against the verdant landscape, Nina took a deep, fortifying breath of the fresh spring air, a silent acknowledgement of the new season, of new beginnings. There would be more challenges ahead, she knew. The work of cultivating a truly inclusive, equitable community was an ongoing, lifelong endeavor. But for now, in this luminous, hopeful moment, she allowed herself to simply feel hope. Hope for Lisa. Hope for their family. And hope for a future where every child, in every community, could feel truly safe, profoundly valued, and unequivocally, wonderfully at home. Video Deep Research Canvas.